Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Welcome back to another weekly used gun review. In these videos, we take about 8 used firearms that have come into the store and give you guys about a 2 to 4 minute review of each to give you guys an idea of some different stuff out there on the market. Remember, the point of this video is strictly to be entertaining and educational. We are not making this video to sell anything to keep in accordance with YouTube's policies. If you guys come back and keep enjoying these videos, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Also hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I'm posting these videos. Go ahead and give the video a like and leave a comment. That also helps me out as well. Anyway, guys, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into it now. Alright, this video is brought to you by our new website, WeBuyGuns.com. If you are considering selling a firearm or firearms collection, please log on to our site, create an account, and submit your firearms for an offer request. Now, with that offer, you will get a printable offer certificate, which you can take with you to competing gun stores to try and leverage yourself a better deal. If you're unable to get a better deal, go ahead and sell it to us. We do provide you with a shipping label, and we will pay you with either a paper check or ACH direct deposit to make the process as easy for you as possible. Remember, go check us out at WeBuyGuns.com. Starting off with the format of this video, we do start with most common and move through least common as the video progresses. Starting us off with our first firearm. This is a revolver that comes to us from a viewer in Michigan, so thank you so much for sending this one along to us. This is a Pieta manufactured clone of the Colt Single Action Army, this one specifically in a 7.5-inch barrel chambered in .357. Now, starting off with Pieta, they would get started in about the late 1950s, with Giuseppe Pieta, who would start manufacturing parts, and he would make those at home with his own machines that he had at home in his own living room. Now, throughout the 1950s, we have a lot of domestic arms manufacturers, of course locally here in the United States as well as abroad, including in Italy, who were gearing up for commercial production because we had the end of the Second World War. There was a lot of demand for his parts, so he would get a lot of experience dealing within the firearms industry. Now, through the 1960s, he and his brother would come up with their first line of Western-style shotguns, which would be met with a lot of success and vigor in the market. From there would be demand for the old, Civil War era, old Western-style black powder revolvers, which they would manufacture to tremendous success. And then throughout about the late 1960s into the 1970s, they would come out with their first line of Colt, self-contained cartridge revolvers, mainly patterned off of the Colt Single Action Army. Now, in 2002, Pieta would receive Revolver of the Year from the SASS, that's the Single Action Shooter Society, which was a big deal and would really put them on the map. And a lot of these firearms, as well as those made by Uberti, which got its started in the 1950s doing something very similar, would be used in a lot of Western-style firearms, as all those Western movies and shows are really gaining a lot of popularity through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And also these are used to tremendous extent through competitive shooters and things like that who don't want to, go out there with an expensive Colt Single Action Army. This is a really good substitute and a stand-in. Now, the Colt Single Action Army itself would come about in 1873 after the expiration of the bore-through cylinder patent known as the Roland White patent. Now, that was a patent exclusively held by Smith & Wesson, and when that would expire, they would come out with this, the first Colt bore-through cylinder of the Single Action Army. As the name would suggest, you have a single action trigger pull. You would have 4 clicks, which is replicated here on the Pieta clone. You go to the half-cocked position, open up the loading gate, load your cartridges, of which it would hold 6, go to full cock, and then fire. When you were empty, you repeated the process by using the ejector rod to manually eject all 6 spent casings, and the process would be repeated. A really popular design at the time, and would become somewhat of the standard until the 1890s with the side ejecting or the side rollout cylinder when they would start coming out with models like that. And of course, this would even be more popular than the top rank versions like the No. 3 revolver from Smith & Wesson and the Schofield and all of that. Really cool firearms. So these replicas are not very expensive. New on the market, they're between about $500 and $600. Uberti and Pieta do manufacture higher end versions that are a little bit more tuned, and those might get up to $700, $800, but they are relatively inexpensive and affordable. Used, you might be in the $400 range. Now, this particular one was imported by a company called Cimarron. Cimarron is one of the biggest importers, the other big one being Taylor, who bring in these Italian manufactured replicas. They have Single Action Armies, they have the muzzle loader, the black powder revolver lines, they have the different variations of the Winchester lineup, the They have a clone of the 1860 Henry, the 1866, the 1873, the 1886, and different variations of that as well. So if you want anything from that era and you don't want to pay the high price tags of originals, it's a really good substitute. So anyway, really happy to get this in and share it with you guys. This is a Pieta. This particular one is their Frontier model, imported by Cimarron, which is a clone of the famed Colt 1873 Peacemaker or Single Action Army. Okay, up next is a really cool pistol I'm sure many of you have seen or at least heard about, and I'm sure many of you have even owned. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 5906, and this one comes to us from a viewer in Nevada. So thank you so much for selling this one to us. The 5906 is part of the third generation of semi-automatic Smith & Wesson pistols that really dominated the market, especially in the police market in the 1990s. Now, being part of the 5900 series, the 5906 was known for being a full steel construction on the frame and on the slide. 9mm double single action with an ambidextrous decocker safety. It did freed from a 15-round magazine. They had 10-round magazines for this as well. You could get it in this standard plastic wraparound single-piece grip. They made them in wood grips. They made them with the standard sights you see here. They made them with the target sights. And these are really, really well known, or really where they would get their fame was, again, with the use of police departments, and is the configuration you would typically find it in. In fact, this may have even been a surplus police use firearm. Now, they also had a lighter variation made on an alloy frame known as the 5903. Those were also very popular in police use because of their lighter weight, but the heavier frame of the 5906 kept your recoil down, your muzzle flip down, your follow-up shots a lot quicker. Therefore, these were favored for police service use, not only here in the United States, but abroad. It did see some military service abroad as well. Now, this would be in production from 1989 until 1999, and unfortunately at the end of the 90s, or I should say through the 90s, we did see the sort of the gaining attention of the polymer frame pistols, mainly with Glock, which would start taking over the police service industry throughout the 1990s, and by about the year 2000, it had most police departments across the country had mainly switched to Glocks or HKs or other similar variants in the polymer frame configuration. But again, for its time, these are really popular. So if you see, 1990s police movies with like Eddie Murphy or any of those, this is mainly what you would see them carrying, is a 5906 or a 5903. Now, because these did see a lot of police service domestically and abroad, they do show up in varying degrees of condition on the surplus market, and they are not too expensive. If you find them really beat up and used, you might find them in the $300 to $400 range. More decent condition ones like this might be in about the $400 to $500 range, and then commercial manufactured 5906s with like the wood grips and the nicer sights and better condition might get upwards of about the $600 to $700 range, as long as they have their original factory box. So really, really, really cool firearms. If you've never gotten a chance to handle one of these third generation Smith & Wesson semi-automatics, especially I prefer the 5906 with the heavier frame. They are a ton of fun at the range. They are very accurate. They're very satisfying to shoot. And if you're looking to get into something that's not super expensive, again, use $300 to $400 for a fairly good condition one, would make a really good backup or primary home self-defense firearm. Again, you have 15 rounds, and these are very, very serviceable and easy to use. So really like these firearms. Definitely worth taking a look at, both as a collectible if you're into collecting like police service pistols. This is one of the most prominent ones. Or if you're looking for something relatively inexpensive that's a little bit different from the polymer family of things that tend to dominate the market. So anyway, I always love seeing a 5903 or 5906 or a third gen Smith in general come in, and happy to get this one here from our viewer in Nevada. Okay, up next is a really cool SKS. Now this is a Yugoslavian model M59, not the 5966 that was known for having the grenade launching spigot here at the front. I had a 5966 on one of these videos maybe a month and a half to 2 months ago, so I'm going to rehash some of the history on that, but I didn't want to waste the opportunity to get a Model 59 in here, okay, which was really the first variation of the SKS adopted by Yugoslavia in 1959. Going back to the history of this, it would start back during the Second World War when Germany would come out with the MP44, the MP43, MP44, the Sturmgewehr rifle, chambered in the world's first real successful intermediate cartridge, the 7.92 by 33mm Kurz round. Now, Russia and Japan had always been known for going back and forth with copying of each other's armaments or their military weapons designs and equipment. Most notably, you see Germany taking a page from Russia's book with Russia's development of the SVT-38 and SVT-40. Germany would follow suit with the Gewehr 41 and then the 43 and the K-43 variants as well. Of course, Russia would be looking at the success of the Sturmgewehr rifle and the intermediate cartridge, a way to sort of marry the concepts of your full-size battle rifle and your submachine gun, giving more capacity, less recoil, more battle effectiveness at medium ranges, as opposed to needing these big, large caliber rifles with a lot of recoil when most of your engagements were happening pretty close anyway. So, Sergei Simonov would start the development of a new rifle that would be chambered in Russia's intermediate cartridge, which would be the 7.62 by 39, very popular today. By about the end of 1945, the SKS was born, and these did see very, very, very limited World War II service at the tail end of 1945, but would be predominantly used post-World War II. Now, there would be a really sort of a short window of when these would be in military service in Russia, because the AK-47 would come out just a couple years later in 1947 with the Kalashnikov design. Detachable 30-round magazine, select fire, which again was more reminiscent of what they were seeing in Germany with the Sturmgewehr, although the inner workings of the Sturmgewehr and the SKS are more related than the Sturmgewehr is with the AK-47, but I digress. Now, a lot of other countries in the Com Bloc era in Europe were looking at a lot of Russian armament calibers, designs, and things like that, and you would get several countries, those being China, Romania, and Yugoslavia, who would adopt a direct carbon copy, if you will, of the SKS version. Now, through the 1940s, Yugoslavia had been using a different variety of like the 47 and 48 Mauser, either directly built off of German tooling. They would have their own at-home manufactured versions as well. I've talked about those in previous videos. But this would be the first adoption of an intermediate caliber semi-automatic rifle by Yugoslavia. And like I said, that would be in 1959. These are, of the 59 or the 5966, these are definitely more closely related to the original Soviet Russian SKS variant, and these are harder to come by. Most of these were either converted to the 5966, or most of what you would see is with the grenade launching capabilities, but without that, this would still have the bayonet. Very, very, very nice looking rifle, and again, as close as you can get to the Soviet or Russian SKS without actually buying a Russian SKS. So really, really cool. On the surplus market today, these are definitely going up in price. I would say that these are a little bit more valuable than the 5966s. The 5966s are a little bit more iconic and what you would think of when you think of a Yugoslavian SKS. But we're seeing them, like the 5966s are tending to hover right now in about the $500 to $600 range, depending on condition, up maybe if it's a really pristine and mint condition one. But if you look hard enough, one that's serviceable and pretty good condition, you should find them maybe in about the $500 range or so. But the 5966s, of course, will vary. But really, really cool rifles nonetheless. Happy to get this one in. This one comes to us from a local customer. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share this one with you. So that is a Model 59 M59 Yugoslavian SKS. Okay, up next we have a really cool revolver that comes to us from a viewer in Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for sending this one along to us. This is an H&R Harrington & Richardson Model 649 22LR 22 Magnum with the convertible cylinder in its original box, and this particular one has a 5.5-inch barrel. Now this is one that I do not know a huge amount about. I mean, I know about H&R revolvers and firearms in general, their shotguns and whatnot. There's not a lot of information out there on the market. From what I gather, this was manufactured between 1976 and 1981, so only for about 5 years, and was really meant to compete with the Ruger New Model Single 6, which would hit the market in 1973. Now, the original Single 6 hit the market in the 1950s. There was a lot of commercial success with that. The new model had come out, and then H&R saw, again, a lot of success with the New Model Single 6, and then a couple years later would come out with their own less expensive variation of that, which was the Model 649 with the convertible cylinder. It did have a lot of stylized features like the single action army, much like the Single 6 with some modern revisions to it. You did have a side loading gate here. You would bring the firearm one click back to the safety notch to turn and load. You would have your ejector lever here. Now this one is in a 5.5-inch barrel. They also made them in a 7.5-inch. I could not find any other barrel length configurations on that other than those two. This is a solid frame, wood grips, really, really nice bluing on here, really nice firearm. And like the new model Ruger, Single 6 would implement the transfer bar, which is becoming very popular around the 1970s. So a really, really cool firearm. I know a lot of people have bought and collected H&R firearms, revolvers, and shotguns or whatnot, mainly due to their price point. So when these would hit the market, they would be very inexpensive, under $100, especially for the pricing at the time. But they are starting to increase in collectability. I'm seeing these used in this condition with original box and both cylinders going in about the $300 range, as long as they're in really good shape and are complete. And part of what made the 649 was the convertible cylinders, and also the fact that this is a both double and single action, which was different from the single 6. So you could fire it in both fire modes. So really, really cool plankers, and I know that there's a lot of people who grew up shooting things like this from H&R. They also had a series of top break revolvers, other 22 variants as well. So really, really cool, and you don't have to travel far to find a H&R pistol revolver at a gun show or on a gun dealer shelf. So pretty common and standard, but I did want to share this one with you guys because I just thought it was cool. But anyway, again, thank you to our viewer in Pennsylvania. That is an H&R 649. Okay, up next is a really cool revolver that comes to us from a viewer in North Carolina. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 66-8 Combat Magnum chambered in .357 Magnum. Now, the story with this would begin in the 1930s, when at the time a lot of police departments here in the United States were issuing revolvers chambered in .38 Special. Most popularly would be the Colt Official Police and the Colt Police Positive revolvers. Now, a lot of police departments wanted something with a little bit more oomph, something a little bit more powerful, with a little bit more penetrating power as well. So they put out a solicitation for a heavier load, either on the .38 Special or a new round altogether. Now, luckily for them, famous wildcatter at the time, Elmer Keith, was currently experimenting with .38 Special rounds, trying to hot load them, coming up with something with a little bit more potential lethality, a little bit faster velocity, hotter ballistics, if you will. Now, Smith & Wesson had said that they would come up with a stronger framed revolver, something meant for a more powerful round if Winchester would undertake the development of the round itself, which they agreed to do, taking Elmer Keith's lead on this, hot loading a .38 Special and also increasing the case length. And out of that, and that's sort of the short and sweet story of it, but out of that would come the .357, which would be really ready for adoption in 1935. Now, Smith & Wesson would start producing a line of revolvers chambered in the .357, the first of which, most popular, was the Model 27. But the war would kick off a few short years later in the 1940s, at least in the United States involvement, and they would cease most domestic innovations and production on domestic firearms and shift gears over to the war effort. Now, when the war was over through the late 1940s and early 50s, they would go back to the drawing board of coming up with new designs for this new .357 load. Now, in the 1950s, Smith & Wesson would join forces with Bill Jordan, who was a retired border agent at the time and a famed competition shooter. And he would want to come up with the ultimate police, or the ultimate officer's revolver. What he more or less envisioned was the K-frame with a 4-inch barrel chambered in the new popular .357 round. So together with Smith & Wesson, they would come up with a Model 19, which would come out for production in 1957. Now, the 19, also nicknamed the Combat Magnum, was blued and was identical to the Model 66, which was the stainless version of the Model 19. The 19 would be in production from 1957 to 1999, would then cease production and then start production again in 2018, and is still made today under the Classic series from Smith & Wesson. Now, the 66, the stainless version, would hit the market in 1971 and is still in production today. What you have here again is the K-frame in the .357. This is a 2 3/4 inch barrel. This one also has a 6-round capacity cylinder. Really nice balance and weight. It is a double single action revolver with adjustable rear sight and a ramped front post with that orange, high vis orange paint, I guess you could say. Narrow spur hammer and a narrow trigger face here as well. Really cool revolvers. Nice, between these and like the 686, I prefer the 686, but a really nice compromise between heft, weight, and size, and I can see why something like this would be an ideal service-style revolver, which is really why this was brought into existence in the first place. Model 19, the grandfather of this revolver, is been a staple in the Smith & Wesson collector communities and for the .357 Magnum lineup ever since it was brought into the market in the 1950s. So undoubtedly a really popular design. On the market today, new, these are about $800 or $900 respectively. I know MSRP on them is around the 800s, but these aren't really widely available right now, so the pricing's up just a little bit. Used, you might be in about the $700 range or so. Really cool firearms. Happy to get this one in and share it with you, and that is a Model 66-8 Combat Magnum. Okay, up next is a really unique rifle that I know a lot of people are interested in. This is a Romanian PSL, which comes to us from a local customer who made the drive down to sell me this, as well as a few others. Really nice to meet him and his wife today. Thank you so much for selling this one to us. Again, this is a Romanian PSL, specifically imported by Century Arms as the PSL 54C. These have been coming into the country since 1997. This looks to be more of a more recent import based on the furniture. Again, they are still bringing them in today. Where the story with this begins is actually with Romania through the 1960s. Now, there was some political turmoil between Romania and the Soviet Union throughout the 1960s, having to deal with Czechoslovakia. I'm not too savvy on the history there, but that would lead Romania into wanting to have their own at-home manufactured domestic arms production and manufacture. They had started this with their own variation of the AKM as well. Many of us get a lot of Cougar manufactured AKMs into the country as well, and those would start coming in through the 1990s as well. That would not be any different with their DMR, Designated Marksman's Rifle. Now, everybody knows that Russia had been producing the Dragunov rifle, which this is often confused with. It shares a lot of the similar aesthetics, lines, and features. However, it is mechanically very, very different. The PSL really is a beefed up, scaled up AKM pattern working under the exact same principles, except it's just beefed up for the 7.62x54R round. You have a reinforced 1.5mm thick receiver. You have a milled main recoil spring, or the guide rod. Of course, it uses the standard detachable box 10-round magazine. Has similar Dragunov looking furniture on here. It's really all it is. It's not really meant to be a pinpoint, precise, precision sniper rifle. It is a designated marksman's rifle, which would give the squad a little bit of a tactical edge, having a little bit fire superiority for suppression purposes. And this is really meant to be able to hit a man-sized target at about 800 meters. So we're not talking about pinpoint precision here. This would not, need a tremendous amount of training to use, as a lot of the practical applications of use of the standard AKM would equate to this, as the controls and everything are virtually identical, just a beefed up AKM. Now, as mentioned, these would start coming into the country here in the 1990s. Production with these would begin in Romania in the 1970s. They saw a lot of success there. Not only Romania has used the PSL for military application, other countries have as well, and it is still issued in Romania today. Now, beginning in the late 1990s, 1997, this would start coming into the United States from 3 importers. The most prominent one would be Century Arms, and like I had mentioned, they are still being imported today. They are very, very collectible amongst shooting enthusiasts. They are fun on the range. 7.62x54R is relatively available. A couple manufacturers are still making it now. With the thing with the ban of Russian imported ammunition, that's going to get a little bit interesting. But they are really, really interesting, fun firearms to collect, and because of that military history and because they look similar to a Dragunov, a lot of people like to pick this up to sort of fill that Dragunov hole in their collection. On the market today, these have been steadily climbing. I remember when you could pick these things up maybe 10 years ago at gun shows for $700 with the scope. Now they're selling new for about the $2,000 plus range with the optic on it. Used without the optic, you're finding them maybe in about the $1,400 to $1,600 range like this. So definitely maintaining a lot of value, a lot of collectability there. And really, really interesting firearms nonetheless. So really happy to get this one and share it with you guys. This is the Romanian PSL 7.62x54R. Okay, up next I have a really nice pistol that comes to us from a viewer in Kansas. So thank you so much for sending this one along to us. This is a Baer custom in Gunsite Academy Inc. co-opted 1911 45 ACP government size high polished blued pistol, and man, that is really nice and smooth. I am a huge fan of these handguns. They are very, very well made, and that goes without saying. Now, Baer as a company was founded in 1991 in Illinois. Because of all the legislation and rules and laws that would plague Illinois with gun owners and manufacturers, they would move to Iowa, which is where they exist today. Now, this really paints a picture and the change of the evolution in firearms manufacturing, manufacturing of a lot of things in general, but specifically in firearms. If we go back to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, manufacturing was really, you would have the different manufacturers hire very highly skilled, very highly specialized people, artisans of their field, to do final assembly, fit, finish, polishing, honing in of all the parts. And these are really built to very much what we would call a handmade or a hand fit and finish standard, okay? Now, as time would go on and production line assembly would become more prevalent, CNC machining would become more accurate and precise, the cost of manufacturing got way too high when you paid specialized people to hand fit these things together, which is why a lot of firearms today are made via the assembly line or the CNC machine method, which is what you see is true of Springfield and Smith & Wesson and Ruger 1911s, or different variations of handguns. It keeps it down to an affordable price point that we can all get into and enjoy. That has left the niche market wide open for highly precisely made, beautiful works of art like this, and typically 1911s tend to be the platform that people focus on because you can really bring out the artisanry or the artistic nature of the firearms when they're built and finished by hand like this. Now, Baer has a team of people that are specialized in each component of the manufacture of this, whether it's down to the hand checkering on the back, front and back straps, the slide serrations, the final polishing. The parts are manufactured a little bit oversized and are honed in by hand to get you get that very, very, very precise. I mean, you can't, it's amazing how it can be so tight and flush and also so smooth at the same time. You can really only get that when each individual part is honed down precisely to where it gets that nice smooth transition. So undoubtedly Baer, Ed Brown, Cabot, all the different manufacturers, the high-end premium handmade 1911s, are definitely have a market there that people like to dabble in, especially when they get into advanced competition shooting and things like that. Now, to go along with the story on this, we can go back to 1976 with Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper, who establishes the Gunsite Academy, Inc., which is known for being a premier place for training on handgun use. Specifically, he would always tailor people towards a 1911 platform. That was what he really excelled at and really pushed his customers into. They did a lot of high-end training with law enforcement departments, with military units, very specialized units, and has always been regarded since the 1970s as being one of the premier places to get training and learn adaptation on different firearms, again, mainly handguns, 1911 specifically. They would co-op with Baer to come up with this, which is the Gunsite Academy Inc. 1911 pistol, which has myriad different upgrades and features to it, too many to really list off in this video, but is meant to be the ultimate combat fighter carrier's handgun, made to such a high level of precision by Baer, with the tactics or with the applications really derived into its manufacture due to the practicalities instilled by a very well-known academy or instructors, if you will. So undoubtedly really, really cool. Price point on these types of pistols, I mean, anywhere these custom-made 1911s go anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 respectively. But I don't know exactly what the manufacturing parameters are around this or what they charge for them brand new. You have to fill out your order sheets and stuff like that to get a price, but somewhere probably in the $2,000 range, respectively. But anyway, really, really cool firearms. Happy to get this one in and share it with you guys, and that is a Baer custom co-opt with Gunsite Academy, Inc. Okay, last but not least, I have another really nice 1911. This one coming to us from a viewer in Michigan, so thank you so much for sending this one along to us. This is an Ed Brown Evo KC9 9mm 1911, and it is a beautiful firearm. The story with Ed Brown would actually begin back in the 1960s. Now, specifically in 1968, Ed Brown would open his own gunsmithing business. He would take firearms that belonged to other people, mainly competitive shooters, and he would fine-tune and hone them in to make them more viable competitive shooting and also concealed carry options for his customers. Now, over the span of about a 20-year career, not only would he be heavily invested in gunsmithing, he would also be very focused on competitive shooting, mainly focused around the 1911 platform, which is what he shot in competition. This was very common around the 60s to the 80s, and 1911 was probably the most commonly used pistol configuration used in competitive shooting. Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of demand for gunsmithing work around this regard, so Ed Brown would really get a name for himself, as other competitive shooters would often send them his firearm to be worked on, modified, reconfigured, to make it a better competitive shooting option. Now, one thing that Ed Brown had noticed that there was a very big lack of was aftermarket parts support for 1911s. There's a very small amount of selection for internal parts like hammers and beaver tail safeties and triggers and mainspring guides and things like that. Sights is a very, very limited market there. So realizing that he had a good customer base growing in gunsmithing And he really had a really well-known name in the competitive shooting market. He had actually been listed at one time through the 1970s as one of the top 15 shooters in the United States. He decided that he would go into parts fabrication. Again, this was mainly so he could make parts designed for how he wanted them to perform in his firearm as well as the firearms of his customers. So in 1986, he would enter parts fabrication, and very shortly after that, Brownells would actually pick him up as a line. And from there, that would springboard him into huge success. Shortly after that, he would get into building completed firearms like this. And really, it's his completed 1911 designs today that have made the company very popular and successful. Now, Ed Brown is a multi-generational company. It is currently run today by his children. And unlike Les Baer that we just took a look at, they are not really priding themselves on the hand-built nature of the 1911. They do final hand fit and assembly, but most of the parts are done by very sophisticated CNC machining. So they've taken modern technology and tried to improve it, getting to very, very, very precise cuts, very precise fit, which you can actually really feel. There is still a very smooth slide transition, no movement between the slide and the frame. But also what they're really known for is their stylizing. The very unique serration cuts, the snake scaling in the front and back strap. This bobtail grip was actually a design concept from Ed Brown themselves. This is where it originated. A lot of other companies, mainly you see this on Kimber and Smith & Wesson pistols. This is actually, it all originated here with Ed Brown. So he could really think outside the box and break the mold on what the 1911 was traditionally meant to be, coming up with really nice styles, very square cuts up here. Every single individual firearm, even though mainly made on machines, the design concepts are all very unique, interesting to look at, and very functional, very comfortable, very well balanced in the hand. That's why Ed Brown is just really well regarded, again, as a premium 1911 manufacturer. The pricing on these, again, being a custom 1911 designer, is pretty well all over the board, anywhere from about $2,000 to $4,000. Something like this on the used market, you know, $1,400 plus is about where I see them hovering, plus or minus depending on condition, what they come with, original box and that sort of thing. So really, really cool firearm. Happy to get this in, and a big thank you again to our viewer in Michigan for sending this one along to us. Well, that is all the time I have for you today on these. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know by hitting the like button. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when I am posting new content. I'm going to leave you guys off there. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.